much, but also being able to teach the other. And at some point, I started thinking, but what about forgiveness? And that was a big issue to deal with. And through that forgiveness aspect, we started a campaign called Forgiveness and State Reconciliation. And I remember going to the first school, and everyone is looking at what we are doing. And mostly the older people are wondering, what's wrong with these guys? And of course, some of them will tell us, hey, listen, you don't know what you went through. You can't be telling people to forgive. And for me, I was thinking, if someone has lost their family, and by losing, now I'm saying that also cognizant that amongst us in our group, there are those who lost their beloved to the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda. And I was telling myself, if they lost their beloved, how is it going to happen they're going to still be bound to the people who committed these atrocities against them? Can we find a way for them to be free in their hearts? Maybe start with healing. And of course I got to learn that this is a process. But I said, let me start with young people, those that I could. In 2008, we did the first forgiveness campaign. Took it to different schools, but we also did a national one. We brought perpetrators of genocide survivors together, and they shared their story. Now, at a place where there was one side story and the other side story, now they became one story, because together they talked about the fullness and the magnitude of genocide. Some talking about how they survived it, others talking about how they perpetrated it, but also the journey that we needed to go together so that we can find healing. In 2009, I said, well, I've learned somehow some information from this. Would it be possible that we start an education program? So I founded Walk to Remember. And the Walk to Remember, glad that you guys also have a walk here. I hope we can partner next year and do one for the genocide against the Tutsi here in Rwanda, here in Coventry. And starting up Walk to Remember, my idea was, can I do something that will bring very many people, that people will start asking, why are you walking? And we tell them, we're remembering the Tutsis who were killed in 1994. And why was that very important? It was very important because those who committed the genocide not only wanted to kill the Tutsis, but they also wanted to wipe out their memory. That's why they not only killed the men and women, but they also killed their children, and they destroyed their pictures, and they destroyed their houses. So some of the places, if you ever come to Rwanda, you might see them as farms. But whenever you see that, also remember that this might have been a place where there was a house. And they did that to make sure that they erase their memory. How do we make sure that their memory doesn't die? Because by that happening, then we're making sure that they are not forgotten. But also us as a new generation, we're learning from it to make sure that it doesn't happen again. But the other question was, how do we learn it? By not harming those who listen and hear it. I'm glad that Andy Fine is here, and at some point in time he calls me and he says, well, I'd want you to create another PLP. And I'm like, no. I cannot create another PLP because it already exists. PLP is Peace and Love Proclaimers, the youth organization I had founded. And then I told him, why don't we start a program where we train young people, send them back in the community, let them find problems that are there, and then we support them to bring solutions in their own communities. Because they should be the drivers of the solutions in their own communities. We should not wait for solutions to come from elsewhere. That's how the Youth Champion programs comes in. And we work on it to make sure that it works. And as a matter of fact, now we've trained over 3,000 young people, and they have started somewhere around 460 something projects, which each has at least on average 30 young people as among it. 30 young people who are part of the project. And these are young people bringing impact in their own communities. And of course you might wonder, what were you teaching them? We're teaching them values. Why? Because during the genocide, there are values that were lost. What are some of those values? There is empathy. If I did this to you, how would you feel? But also if it happens to me, how would I feel? So teaching young people to be empathetic makes them understand that they should not harm the other, because now if it happened to them, they would feel the same way. Can they put themselves in the shoes of the other? But also during the genocide, and if you hear many testimonies of genocide perpetrators, mostly the young, they'll say, we were told to do, and we did. So how do we teach you to become critical thinkers? So that you can start thinking, why do I think the way I think? And if someone tells you something, do you take it at face value, or can you start asking questions and make sure that you can critique it, and also you make your own decision? But also, as you make your decision, could you be a responsible citizen? So that you don't wait for the others to do, but whatever action you take becomes an action that develops where you are, brings healing to where you are, instead of adding fuel to the fire. And eventually, when this started working, we started thinking, how do we take this across Africa? How do we go from one place to the other? So we started going from Rwanda to, thank you John Petrie, to South Sudan. I think you remember this time when I went to Juba. And then I started going to South Sudan, Juba. I started going to as far as Nigeria, Gambia, South Africa, Namibia, Mozambique, Uganda, Kenya. But one thing we learned was each country's context is different. And you cannot just teach them what you went through. The only thing you can do is show them our story, but they also take their own initiative to come up with their own story and how to teach themselves. Otherwise, we cannot replicate what comes from here and its use there. I think that's to say that I should stop. So, I think with that,